The views and opinions expressed on Where Did the Road Go belong to the person speaking them. They do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of other people on the show or the show as a whole. This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by the following amazing individuals: Greg Ross, Bill Illuminati, Allison Cook, Yvonne Williams, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, and Michael Frisky. Thank you all for helping to make this show possible. And if you'd like to help out, become a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month for lots of extra content.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I have back with me, finally, Mr. Super Inframan.
Hello, hello.
Or Saxon Super Infra person.
Yes, Matt Festa dubbed me the Super Saxon Man, which I'll take that. It works pretty good too.
I never know what to look you up under, because like on every device you're under a different name. It's like, is it Saxon or Super Inframan?
Well, Super Inframan has a lot of different identities in the real world, depending on where he's at. It's kind of like the Shadow with all of his identities when he's not the Shadow.
And we have Jonathan Bartholomew, who is back again with us because he hasn't started his new job yet.
Yeah, still got a few days of freedom left.
Yes, taking advantage of your openness. So, and let me see if I can do it off the top of my head. Jonathan, your podcast is Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic.
Yep.
Oh my God, I got it. I did not have that in front of me.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Who would name their podcast such a long thing? I mean, you should keep them short like me. So, I want to start out with what you guys were already talking about, which is this comic/magic book by Alan Moore.
Yeah, it's called The Moon and Serpent Bumper Book of Magic, and it is a mixture of history of magic as he understands it, guide for practice. It even has templates that you can either copy or cut out for little temples to go on your altar.
Yeah, Jonathan, you might want to give us some background on Alan Moore if you don't mind. You'll be very good at that.
Well, I mean, he'll tell you he created modern comic books. I don't know that I would go as far as to admit that, but with Watchmen being one of the first truly grown-up dark things that DC ever did, and has gone on from there. But V for Vendetta would be one of his kind of standouts. I would say most people would say he definitely helped, among many other people, from that time frame in the mid to early 80s, helped to recraft how you tell a comic story.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, especially like he and Dave Gibbons when they did Watchmen. Like it's so intentional and meticulous, and like the panel layout, and I know for listeners that may not be familiar with comics, but you could compare that to like a filmmaker and a cinematographer, like figuring out how they're going to pause on certain details and what they're going to emphasize. In the frame and even the environment and things. Dave Gibbons has a very literal, grounded kind of style of illustration. So things weren't exaggerated. There's no onomatopoeias, flashing in the air like the old 66 Batman show. And of course, a lot of people took good lessons from Watchmen and a lot of people took bad lessons from Watchmen. And they got the dark and the gritty, but they didn't get the depth and the commentary. And so you've got that, and then Moore looks a lot like Rasputin.
Really?
you can find there's a meme of him out there that says like Alan Moore, author, warlock, and Rasputin impersonator. And I mean, if you look him up, you're like, oh wow, this guy does look like Rasputin. But he, has always had a strong magical practice. He seems more traditional in terms of his practices. Probably the antithesis of Grant Morrison that Chris Ernst and I talk about a lot. Okay. Where Morrison's much more of a chaos magic kind of guy, or person, I should say. But Moore also is one of those figures that met John Constantine, that we say Constantine over here. But he had 2 encounters with John Constantine, and that was his creation. So, I mean, the guy has had some interesting experiences with his magical practice and his writing and everything else.
Huh. Okay. It's interesting that anyone would put a magical book out in the form of a comic book. I'd just never heard of that before.
Yeah, the way they've got it set up, mostly it's the stuff talking about like kind of the further history stuff that they did in comic form. Like it begins with this story about those caves in France that they found a little while back that show the like the shaman with the herd of elk.
Right, and like the almost 3-dimensional looking cave paintings.
Yes. Yeah. He's kind of anchoring that as like an early shamanistic experience.
Oh yeah.
And then goes on through there, and he talks about John Dee a lot. I do think, and just reading between the lines, and I've only gone through this once, and I know I'm going to go through it more than once because there's just so much material. I do think that it kind of is like an unspoken admission that he is into the Enochian thing a little more than I previously would have expected.
Keep going. I'm just agreeing with you, Jonathan.
I mean, just which is super interesting to me. Like, not really my thing personally. If there is a spectrum between Morrison and Moore, I would be a lot closer to Morrison, with the not being a ritualistic person at all.
Right.
But I do think that there is some amount of John Dee-esque situation there.
All right. I've never gotten that much into Enochian magic. I thought it was interesting, but I was never sure what to make of it. But I love the concept of the aethers, and that's why when I started my zine and stuff, everything would be published under Etheric Productions, which, back in the early 90s, most people had no idea what that meant. But I took it as spirits of the air, creativity, intelligence, things like that.
Yeah. And Morrison, pardon me, I didn't mean to say Morrison, I meant to say Moore. Just with kind of building off something Jonathan brought up too, with that cave painting being like a form of early shamanic magic. I looked at more. I'm going to keep saying Morrison. People are going to kill me for that. For Moore did a sort of like master class on writing, and of course it's like 33 videos, which is also kind of interesting that he picked 33 somehow. But early on, and even in like the PDF materials that come with it, he talks about writing being magic. And he goes, if we went back, 500 years ago and we thought about, Seriah, you writing something down on a piece of paper and then that being delivered to Jonathan across the country, you have transmitted thoughts to him. And, if you go back before we had written writing, what did that look like before you could write things down? Yeah. And so, this sort of formulation of scratches and symbols that can be transported are the sort of like proto manifestation of like magic that you can get your hands on easily. But that's how he starts off his master class, which I think is actually like a BBC class or something like that. But it's their equivalent of how he approaches writing, because he's like, I'm an author, but really I'm a wizard. And it's like, you know what? You are. This is awesome.
All right. Well, I have here a few listener stories I want to get to. Not enough to do a whole listener story show. But when Saxon, when you were on with Brennan Store.
Yeah.
Store. Storr, I think. Or no, Storr. Yeah. But anyway, he was talking about his elevator experience.
Yeah.
And so Dead Legato on YouTube sent me this one. He said, my weird elevator story. I'm leaving work for the day, and I've reached my parking ramp. This ramp has a bit of a weird layout. The top floor is on the ground floor, and it's numbered 1. But all of the other floors are underground and start from A at the closest to the surface, running to G at the deepest. When I enter the elevator lobby, one elevator is already waiting. In the back of the elevator is an older man with a gray hair and a gray beard. Kind of gave me a wants to dress like Willie Nelson sort of vibe. He's already pressed D. I press level F. This means we'll get to his floor before mine. Right as the elevator door is about to close, a tall, skinny guy with dark hair and no beard enters the elevator lobby. More of a hipster vibe to him. He speeds up to catch the elevator, and I go to push the door open button, but neither of us makes it in time, and the door closes. Elevator goes down to D, stops, and the door opens as usual. From behind me, the young, clean-shaven guy goes around my left side and gets off the elevator, walking quickly. I jump slightly because I know the elevator left him on 1, and it's not like he had a twin already on the elevator, since the only other person on the elevator was the old guy, who I then immediately notice is no longer on the elevator. I briefly consider running up the stairs once I got to my own stop on level F to see if the older guy would get off at a later elevator, but decided I was too lazy.
Wow. So just to make sure I understand, the person that couldn't get on the elevator then walked from behind him to get off the elevator.
Right. And the other guy was gone.
No, the other guy was gone. Ah, that's freaky.
So, because I believe he said the other guy was gone. I get the impression the other guy was gone, but yeah. Okay, yeah, because he says I briefly considered running up to level F to see if running down to level F to see if the older guy would get off, as if he was still there.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. You know, that whole the Brendan story. I got messages on Instagram from a couple of folks that, for whatever reason, that particular story really creeped them out. You know, and the whole elevator thing is just kind of backroom adjacent. And then you have these things that happen, just like this listener's story. It just, I don't know. It's all very liminal. You're in a box. The box opens up. You're somewhere different. So it just starts creating, I don't know. It just feels like it is an attractor for weird stuff to happen.
True.
Especially since they're talking about being 5 and 6 stories underground. That definitely adds to that to me. I don't want to be that far underground. I'm not interested in that at all. It's a little creepy.
Yeah. And you know, you have like the Elisa Lam stuff. Although that was sped up and edited, so we don't really know what was going on there. But the elevator definitely played a part in the weirdness of that. So
yeah, you know, and then folks will laugh at me about this, and that's okay. But you know, when Eccleston became the Doctor, one of the early episodes I remember is they're like in a department store, and there's an issue with the elevator somehow. I can't remember how it worked out, but I
want to say that was the first episode.
It was.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that in case I got it wrong. But, you know, he gets off the elevator and there's all the mannequins that are there, like just waiting to, you know, kill them. And
very Silent Hillish.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was very Silent Hillish. And, you know, I miss that horror vibe in Doctor Who sometimes. I'm glad when we get it back. But, you know, I don't know. It's so easy to be creepy in that kind of environment. And I don't know why, but it definitely works.
Yeah. Yeah, Doctor Who definitely, the new one definitely kind of varies back and forth from too like political and or family friendly to kind of dark and creepy.
Yeah, yeah.
Or outright stupid sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely I like the creepy side of things a lot more with that.
Oh yeah, me too. And everyone loves like the Weeping Angels and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, that was a brilliant, you know, brilliant concept to add into sci-fi. And I'm not going to ruin it for anyone who has never watched it, but That's, I think, in the second season, maybe the Weeping Angels.
I think so. It's modern Who, and it's one of those things that once you watch the episode and you're exposed to that, it's one of those ideas that's genius and straightforward at the same time. And it feels like it's been around forever. It's just, it's really, really, really nicely done as a story concept for, I'm going to stop there actually, because I'll spoil it for somebody.
If you've never seen the new Doctor, I didn't like the original Doctor Who, so I when I saw it was getting rebooted, I'm like, do I care? And then I watched it, and after like 3 episodes, I was looking forward to the next one. I'm like, I guess I like it. All right.
Yeah. I loved Eccleston's season as
so did I.
The Doctor. Yeah. Because I had tried to watch the older show on PBS growing up, and it just didn't land for me the same way. And of course, going back to some of those episodes, it works much better for me now. But Eccleston's Doctor, just that season had such a nice, creepy, slightly unsettling. The Doctor's got that like edge of anger that's always lurking, where you think he might go off. Right. Probably not, but it's still there. I really enjoyed that.
And the thing is, I didn't realize there was this whole regeneration thing. Because like I said, I didn't watch it. And at the end, when Eccleston changes into
Tenet,
yeah, I was like, what? No, but I liked Eccleston. I don't want someone else. And I'm like, oh wait, this Tenet guy's good too. All right, we're good.
Yeah.
And I've liked every Doctor they've had.
Yeah.
Like some more than others, but there's there were some people who were like, oh, I don't like this Doctor, or I don't like that. I'm like, I don't know, they all have their thing that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, like, Tenet, I love Tenet too. Tenet feels like if you saw him, if you ran into that Doctor, like you knew you would have a good time somehow. Like there's going to be this element of fun, even if it's terrifying. Eccleston's Doctor always gave me that hint of like, this might be what it would be like to meet a man in black. Right. Because there's a little uncanny valley quality with him, and that, there's not a feeling of safety there.
Well, I think with Tenet, they also did a good job of showing the sort of trauma he was dealing with from all the stuff he had done.
Yeah.
Which,
absolutely.
That was a nice touch because it's real. But like most of Tenet's other acting roles, he's a heel. He's a villain in so much stuff, and he's so creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, Jessica Jones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was a Purple Man, my gosh.
He was the perfect Purple Man.
He was. Yeah.
You liked him a little less after that role.
Yeah, that's for sure. He got Miss Crowley later on, that was fun.
He was what?
In Good Omens.
Oh, right. Yeah. I forgot he was in Good Omens. Yeah, that's a mess now.
Yeah, that is a mess now.
They, and the thing is, like, they did that first season, and it had an ending, and I'm like, why are you renewing it? And I never watched the second season because I was like, I don't know, like you ended the world. How do you continue?
Yeah, like I don't need to watch it.
I mean, I didn't love it because it's not totally my thing, but I liked it enough, and I was just like, I don't know that I need a season 2. Don't complete your story and then go, oh, people really liked it. We can make money off this. Let's make a second season.
Yeah. That's exactly what it felt like. And my nephew actually said the same thing to me about it too, because he loved it. And he was like, I loved it, but then they kept making it.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. All right. So the other one here, this came off of Reddit from Vanta Black 666. As someone who has suffered from sleep paralysis and has researched it heavily, I'd say I have a very good understanding of it. I'm also an atheist. However, my experiences with sleep paralysis, with my experiences, no, that's what he said. However, my experiences with sleep paralysis, I can't help to question whether there are certain supernatural things we can't explain. It's hard to even talk about this without having this dreadful feeling creep up on me. If you haven't experienced sleep paralysis, there's nothing more terrifying. And I've had several near-death experiences running into bears, cougars, wolves. It started happening when I moved into a new apartment, right after I saw something unexplainable in my kitchen. Whatever it was, it didn't like me.
The sleep paralysis got worse and worse. It went from happening every so often to multiple times a week to every day. And it got more malicious each time, too. One time I woke up from it happening, walked out of my room into the front room where I found my partner upset. I explained to him the demon was in the bedroom, so I couldn't go back in there. Then my partner looked at me and said, "It's not in the room, it's possessed you." Then I felt it trying to take over my mind. The spiral I had from that was horrifying. I started to choke. I tried to force it out of my body as it was taking over. Then I really woke up, which was so strange since the dream was so vivid. I remember the feeling of the carpet beneath my feet. I quickly ran out of the room and found my partner on the couch wearing exactly what he was wearing in the sleep paralysis dream. Another time I woke up to my giant caterpillar I used to sleep with, having all these long spindly teeth smiling down at me and saying, "I'm going to digest you." F that. It got so bad I was too scared to sleep. It happened to me anytime my eyes would shut. I went days without sleep to the point where I started to hallucinate. My friend bought me some weed and it knocked me out for 18 wonderful hours. At this point, I was staying over at anyone's house but mine because it was the only way I could sleep. So my partner and I decided to move out because I became convinced there was something that was haunting me. During the apartment interview, the guy asked us where we were moving from and why. I had no intention of giving the real reason until we said the name of the place, and his face dropped. Without hesitation, he said, "That place is haunted." The effing chills that ran down my spine when that happened. I felt like I was in a movie. No way did he just say that. But then we collectively began sharing our horror stories together. We decided to move, and immediately the sleep paralysis stopped. I went 2 years before ever having another episode, and these episodes are much more mild. They aren't terrifying, just annoying. They feel like you'd expect normal sleep paralysis to feel like, but there is something way different about sleep paralysis that's caused by something haunting you. And I thought that was a very interesting take by this person, because yes, there's just regular sleep paralysis, but then there's the stuff that's like, what's going on right now?
Yeah. So we were talking about the show Evil before we started recording tonight.
Yeah.
And they do a lot with that too, where she has George, that shows up in her room quite a bit when she has sleep paralysis. And as soon as that first scene came on, I was like, oh my gosh, are they doing sleep paralysis and a shadow person's going to come out? It was so spot on and researched, and of course they made him a George look more like an actual demon.
Yeah. But
it has a lot of the same hallmarks that this person's experience was like. And it is terrifying. And it's interesting because, sometimes like that getting caught in the loop where they saw their partner.
Oh, yeah. And
their partner like kind of gave them some advice, which was sort of unsettling because you're like, well, how would they know that this thing's attached to me? And then waking up and having that happen again. I've had that happen to myself before too. And, you're trying to force yourself to wake up.
Yep.
And you think you wake up and you get up to do stuff and then you're stuck in this same friggin' thing again.
Yep. And it's frustrating after a while. It stops being creepy and just starts getting annoying.
Yeah. But, just like the listener story said too, that frustration, like it keeps you from getting rest.
Yes. Yeah.
So even though you're asleep, you're still going to wake up exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm glad that being able to move fixed that problem for them.
Which is interesting too. So like what in that place is causing that? Is it something environmental? Is there actually an entity there? Like there's so many different things that could potentially be causing it and there's no real way to know,
Yeah. It's, I'm curious about that too, because, when I had my like least fun Shadow Man experiences, I was living in a duplex, pretty close to where I was going to college, and they definitely tapered off when I moved out of there. But, I also, got good advice from, my friend Wendy and some folks like that were, much further along in their journeys with paranormal and magic and everything else. And, my friend Wendy was like, oh, well, they only have the power that you give them. And so, if it shows up in there, just imagine that you're, not afraid of it, and you can attack it if you want to, basically. And so that's what I did.
Right.
When it showed up, I imagined it being set on fire, and it didn't like that. And so that fixed that pretty quick. But it's if it's really is situational to that place, like I don't know if you could handle it the same way.
Yeah. Jonathan, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So it reminds me of something that when I was a kid, and I've mentioned on this show a few times. I grew up in Lumberton, North Carolina. There were about 3 years. So the years I was 7, 8, and 9, we lived in this house in southern Lumberton, North Carolina, and the entire time we lived there, one of my brothers had sleep paralysis and night terrors. We would hear footsteps going up and down the hallway. We would get telephone calls to 3 o'clock in the morning and no one would be there, or we would hear faint screaming in the background of the telephone, which is really scary when you're like 8 years old and your parents are confused,
Yeah.
And that's scary at any age.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And then there were other strange things that would happen with lights coming on and turning off with nobody there to do it. And those specific things only happened to people in my family when we lived in that house. About a year and a half ago, I'm convinced that entire town is got something going on with it. You drive into city limits, and your mood will change. The atmosphere feels heavier. And there's a sense of oppression there. The sky is darker. It's just a very real feeling. And about a year and a half ago, I was doing some research to try to get some people onto my podcast to talk about the haunted nature of that place. And I was in a Facebook group trying to talk to people, and I told people what neighborhood I was in. And this lady said, I've had some experiences. This is what my address was, and described the exact things I just said to you that happened when I was a kid. And the address she gave me was my house.
Oh, wow.
She was the tenant that moved in right after my family moved out, lived in the house for 12 years, and was made to feel like a crazy person by all her friends and family because she would try to tell people what was going on, and nobody ever believed her. And so I gave her some of the stories of what happened. And crazily enough, and the thing that is most vivid to most of my family is one of those 3 o'clock in the morning phone conversations or phone calls. One of the few times we could hear anything was a man's voice saying, Chris, it's John. Well, my name is Jonathan, but also my mom's name is Chris, and her brother's name is John. So she had thought that maybe that was what was going on. And this lady, without me ever telling her that story on the internet, had that same call.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Just this man screaming in the background of that.
Yeah.
Huh.
And so that obviously that there's something going on with that house.
Yeah. But again, is it something external affecting that particular property? Is there something, I don't know, weird energy in that property that manifests something that's not an other but behaves like one? And how do you tell the difference?
That's the real question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I suppose it comes down to if you hang around long enough, can you get it to leave?
Right.
Because I feel like if something was like specific to that place, it would take a lot more work. But who knows though?
Well, I mean, even like weird earth energies can affect us in weird ways,
Yeah. I don't know what the rock and earth and things like that in Wilmington are like, Jonathan. I mean, do they stone, sedentary, anything like that?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that question? I apologize.
Oh, just talking about like what's like the ground and things like that, like the earth around.
So it actually is Lumberton, which no one has ever heard of unless they're from there.
Okay.
If you ever read Chris Bledsoe's book, he's from Fayetteville.
Okay,
that's 20 minutes away from Fayetteville.
Okay.
I grew up 20 minutes and 10 years away from Chris Bledsoe, basically, and had some kind of similar experiences from that same region. It's sand. It literally is sand. Like, there's no houses with basements. You can't dig a basement in that place. You dig more than 8 inches and you're in the water. It's beside the Lumber River, which is locally and regionally, there's a lot of folklore about that river being haunted. And that's specifically, that house was less than 2 blocks away from a bend in the Lumber River. But Lumberton itself has got a kind of a dark and bloody history dealing with just oppression and race, and just it's a place that's seen a lot of things. And if you'll notice, if you look at the places that have seen the most in that kind of context, are the places, in my opinion, that you see the most activity in general.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting.
Okay, to pivot here, and we've done a whole series of shows on sleep paralysis a few years ago that you can find on the website, because we there's a documentary called, I want to say it's The Nightmare, that deals with sleep paralysis. And it's it has some really fascinating stories on it. So we started covering that as well as our own experiences. And then I think that's one of the ones that we just got so much listener mail from that we ended up doing another part or two just dealing with listener stories about sleep paralysis. Because they're so varied. It's hard to write it off as one singular thing.
Yeah, it is. And, you have like the idea of hypnagogic states, and seeing gray men and things like that in that situation, that some people will say, use that to explain when people see the grays or when you see shadow people.
Yeah.
But, we've talked about instances on here where people have, seen like their childhood toys when they're children, of course, like get up and put on shows for them,
right,
and things like that, which is, just a completely different kind of, it's creepy looking back on it, but, they'll say at the time, typically, like, it was a pretty fun, benign experience.
Yeah. It just, when you're an adult and look back on it, you're like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, exactly.
So I found this article from SenecaLakeMysteries.com. Now, Seneca Lake is one of the lakes that I live right next to. So, because I'm in the middle of the Finger Lakes, Seneca Lake is one of the Finger Lakes. And Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake both have a history of massive amounts of UFO sightings, going all the way back. And this article actually collected a bunch of them. It starts talking about the drone stuff in New Jersey. This was published on December 31st of last year. So it starts off talking about the New Jersey drones and stuff. But then it gets down here and it says, orbs are nothing new to the Seneca Lake area. For over 70 years, these quietly glowing lights have been reported hovering, gliding, darting, and dancing in the air around the lake and its surrounding communities. So it goes back to, I don't know if it's going, so this is 1950s to 2020s. In Dundee, the United States Air Force Director of Intelligence, along with the USAF Director of Operations, conducted the largest press conference at the Pentagon since World War II on July 29, 1952. In this historic statement, the Air Force publicly acknowledged for the first time their keen interest in flying saucers. Okay, that's just talking about that stuff. So here we go. At 9:45 a.m. on Friday, August 1st, 3 days after the Pentagon press conference, Byron Kronk of Dundee was looking at what he believed to be a bright star in the northeast sky in the direction of the lake. Suddenly, the light shot straight upwards and then briefly paused before traveling abruptly to the north, emitting what appeared to be smoke or vapor, until it was out of sight. The object made no sound. Within seconds, Kronk saw what looked like the same strange light moving southward before he lost sight of it in the morning sun. Meanwhile, that same day, newspaper offices in Elmira were inundated with hundreds of calls of reporting shiny and round, as well as pancake or disc-shaped flying objects. In Afton, just east of the Finger Lakes, locals gathered in the streets and also watched round objects passing across the sky in large numbers for about 2 hours. More sightings were reported in the south-central New York State, as well as the eastern and western regions, making it one of the largest single-day UFO flaps in upstate New York history. So this is 1952.
Huh.
I feel like it's unlikely that stuff was military.
Yeah. Well, and I like So, I always go back to the idea of like the saucer when that sort of became like a prevalent image for UFOs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always like, when I hear saucer, I have to think a little bit about the other circumstances, because I'm always like, did we influence, culture or whatever else, that sort of perception of it? And so when I hear things like spherical things flying around and lights and stuff like that in context with saucers, I just like that for the variation. It feels like there's maybe a little bit more authenticity that you don't have to quite dig into as much. Does that make sense? To feel a little bit more comfortable digging into? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have had anything like that then. And I don't know why we would be testing anything around that area either.
Well, there was a military base right in the middle of the Finger Lakes. I don't know if it was there then. And there's also one up by Watertown. So there's at least two in the local area. I mean, there's military bases all over the country. You can't go that far without finding a military base.
That's true. That's true. I'm just thinking about where you would and this is a problem. I don't want to get off of the drones, but, because we haven't been asked to look up in such a long time, we don't think about it.
Right.
There's a lot more stuff in the sky than we consider being up there that is mundane. But we think that the stuff in the sky is just commercial aircraft, but there's a lot up there. And I always we'll see people post on Reddit occasionally about like black helicopters flying this way or that way. And I'm like, yeah, but the military is always flying in the sky doing different training missions, and they may have just happened to fly your way. That doesn't necessarily mean there's something going on. They're just doing an exercise.
And is it because the Pentagon had this whole announcement that they were investigating UFOs? Is that why this guy was looking up in the first place?
Right, exactly. So you start looking around, and maybe there's weather balloons being launched from somewhere or something like that. You see it. You've never heard of that even existing. And so you start ascribing, different concepts to it. But that's not to say it couldn't be something weird too, you know?
Right. Even if it looks like a normal thing, it might still be weird.
Exactly.
In listening to a recent Paratopia, they had a guest on who saw as a kid, he saw this plane with like 4 propellers flying very low to the ground, very large plane, with this blonde girl just waving at him as it went past their house. And he said now he's like, there's no way that plane was flying that low to the ground. It was way too big. He's like, and I remember thinking one of the propellers wasn't even working.
Yeah, that just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, it's a crystal clear memory. I have no idea what it really was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things where who knows what you've seen, but you're just trying to make sense of it somehow.
Yeah.
Or it's dressed itself up for you, pull bits and pieces out of your mind.
Yeah, or your brain has interpreted it that way.
Yeah. Wow.
So the next one here is autumn 1968. Numerous locations, southern 1/3 of Seneca Lake. November 20th, 1968, Hector, New York, which is literally like 5 minutes from me. Seneca County Deputy Joseph McDonald was traveling south on Route 414 to meet Shiloh County Deputy Robert, Pryzgoda? I think it's Pryzgoda, at the county line, just north of the hamlet of Alois. Around 6:30 p.m., Deputy McDonald was meeting with Deputy Pryzgoda to transport an injured man to Waterloo Hospital. As Deputy McDonald drove, he watched a light heading south above Seneca Lake for some time. Upon arrival, he drew Deputy Prygoza's attention toward the aerial object. Prygoza said it made no noise. There were sparkling, flashing lights in many colors, and it finally disappeared over Watkins Glen. Meanwhile, 2 more law enforcement officers and an extra witness observed the same multicolored flashing light in the sky near Penn Yan. Penn Yan Police Department Patrolman Kenneth Osterman, Yates County Sheriff Deputy Fred Lohman, and a woman on Court Street all spotted the same object around 6:30 p.m. Again, I don't know if that, now we're up into 68. Could that be a military craft of some sort?
It might be. without seeing like drawings and things, it's hard to guess, but they designed the precursor to the SR-71 in 1959.
Right.
I mean, so, basically like, they were almost like this group of crazy engineers out in the desert just allowed to do what they wanted. And yeah, I mean, they just kind of had carte blanche to come up with stuff. And so, I always try to leave room for that just because we're in the middle of the Cold War and the height of the Cold War. And so we're always trying to come up with things, and we're also trying to deceive people into what we might have and things like that.
Yeah.
There's those flying wedges that we had that were sort of testing something like a kind of Dorito shaped landing craft that were eventually sort of like precursors to the shuttle. And they were, like a shiny aluminum on the outside and not very big, and they flew really fast and they were really funny looking. And if you saw one of those things, I would think it was a nuts and bolts UFO.
Any thoughts, Jonathan?
I think that, so from that second one, it would not surprise me if there were, because there at that time was there a military installation near there?
I don't know, because I don't. There was an army depot. I don't know how much stuff they actually did there. I'm pretty sure they did store nuclear stuff there at one point. Not weapons, but just like the stuff to make the weapons, if I'm not mistaken. But I think it was more of a troop depot than anything else.
Gotcha. I just can't help but wonder if it was just some bored soldiers with a standard issue weather balloon and some lights.
A lot of lights, yeah.
Just messing with people. I do think that happens sometimes.
Sure.
And especially like you only have so much to do. This is pre-internet days. Like I do think that kind of stuff happens. That's too many people for me to say someone was making something up. Personally.
Yeah. Well. And, I'm sure y'all saw this going around during some of the drone stuff. A guy made a video, said how to mess with all your neighbors in New Jersey. And it's two balloons with LEDs in them.
Yep.
Then as soon as he lets that thing go up, the air catches it and it starts blowing. And I'm like, oh, that's cruel, man. But you don't know who the person was that did it or anything. And, I think sometimes it's easy for us to forget what life was like pre-internet.
True.
But you couldn't just go look something up to find a picture of a weather balloon or anything else like that. You had to make a trip to the library and hope that they had a book that was recent enough that would have a photograph of what you were trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And then knowing enough to be able to search through the library to find that thing, so it was, I don't know. It just makes all of this so difficult, and it makes everything like that much creepier because I'm amazed we got around and figured out as much stuff as we did.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I know there are like things where kids who have grown up without the internet are like, how did you get places? Like, how did you know where to go? And it's like, you think about it and you're like, how did we get places? I mean, I know we used maps, but man. Like,
you're just looking at the road for like the exit for the road or the interstate or something. At some point that number is going to come up. Yeah. And you just watch. And if you miss it, you have to figure out how you're going to get back.
Right. Yeah. Where are we? Okay. That looks familiar, I think,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Total side tangent, but a couple of days ago, I was talking with a guy about a Japanese cartoon that got localized to the United States in the 80s, Robotech or Macross. And it's very divisive for things that happened afterwards. But even the localization to the United States is, sort of fraught. It's something I enjoy, but not everybody. But, in 1983, 84, when they were putting the show together, nobody was thinking there would ever be something like the internet. They're doing this over the phone through translators to Japan with actual physical media. So they're having to fly to Japan, go look through what the animation company has, have somebody try to translate what's going on in the cartoons to them so they can figure out what they're going to adapt. And just the thought of doing that analog mailing stuff and phone calls and some flights. It's amazing that stuff turned out as well as it did.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But those are things that we kind of lose perspective on sometimes.
Absolutely. All right. So the next one here, so all of these are from like the same time period. It's like a little flap in 1968. Reading, New York. A man was doing chores on his farm in the town of Reading around 6:30 in the dwindling twilight when his 3 children saw a large bright light hovering over the night sky to the west of their farm. He grabbed his binoculars for a closer look. He watched as the object, which made no sound, changed colors from green to yellow, red to white. The man telephoned his relatives about 4 miles north near Rock Stream, who also began watching the silent, motionless airborne light. He also called the Shiloh County Sheriff's Department, and Deputy Alex Cole was dispatched to the farm. Deputy Cole also observed the hovering object, although strangely, Cole said he didn't see the light change colors. Rather, he said it appeared black and white to him. The anomalous object remained in the sky for around half an hour. It doesn't say what happened to it at that point, because that could be anything at that point. Like the fact that it's changing colors is interesting. But like if it just disappeared at the end would also be interesting.
Yeah. And the fact that the other guy didn't see the colors change.
Yeah.
That may be just like, he may have some color blindness actually.
That's actually exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. I was like, the wavelengths may just not register for him as it's shifting the same. Yeah. So, that's interesting. It would be nice to know where it went.
Jonathan, anything?
Does ball lightning change color?
Huh? Ball lightning?
Does ball lightning change color?
Not to my knowledge, but we don't know a lot about ball lightning, so it's possible. Generally, it moves, though. It generally doesn't. I don't think it generally. So the couple of times I've seen ball lightning, it was moving.
Yeah, I think it does. I've never seen it be stationary either. Come to think of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. When things are stationary, I don't know. To me, that's a good indicator of something strange is happening. Planes, balloons, whatever in the sky
don't stay stationary.
It doesn't stay stationary. I mean, even the stars move and the moon moves as the earth rotates at night. So
true.
If you look at the moon for a while over a tree, even, for 10 minutes, will have moved some in the sky.
Let alone like a helicopter. I mean, we say a helicopter can stay in one place, but I mean, for like real effective purposes, that's laughable.
Yeah. It's shifting left and right and up and down and all those kinds of things. It's just trying to find because it's dealing with the air and everything else blowing around.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So the next one is December of 1968. A fuel and feed business operator from Dundee was driving a delivery truck south on Van Dyke Road in Reading, heading toward Mud Lake Road around 5:30 p.m. The man saw something in the distance that at first he thought to be an airplane. He then realized that the object had no red or green wing lights and like a plane would have. It was a brilliant, constant circular light he described as mammoth. The strange light, which the witness believed was around 6 by 8 feet, was moving from west to east and traveling roughly along the same path as County Line Road. The man watched the object for several minutes as he drove approximately 2 miles when it suddenly vanished. According to the witness, as though it became aware of it being watched, it shut off. It didn't fade or fly away behind the clouds. It shut off like someone flipped a switch. But first, it shot down a flat beam of light toward the ground. The next day, Barbara Bell, a reporter from the Ithaca Times, interviewed the witness about the Van Dyke Road sighting. After asking around the neighborhood of County Line Road to see if anyone else saw the same object, Bell found a second witness. A 15-year-old boy was driving a tractor in a nearby field when he saw an extremely bright cluster of lights in the sky. He started towards the farm owner's house to alert them, but the lights turned off suddenly. The entire sighting lasted 10 seconds. Neither witness knew about the other until Bell investigated and wrote about the incident in the evening paper. So that one, at least we know, just disappeared, just clicked right off, which is more likely to be something anomalous than a physical craft of our own making.
Yeah. I would love to know, if like how far in front of him the light was and things like that, in which direction. Obviously, it's following the county road. But so here's the other funny thing about aircraft at night. Sometimes people forget to turn the lights on.
Really?
Yeah. So your wingtip lights, those nav lights, you've got a switch for them in the aircraft. And if you're taking off from an untowered airport, you might like just forget. It's kind of like pulling out of your house without your headlights on in an area that's got plenty of lights on already outside, so you don't notice. And then, or they could have been having some kind of like electrical issue. And I don't think this is what this is. I'm just putting this out here as like a mundane explanation. If you had a landing light that was pretty bright, you might follow the highway to just try and figure out where you're going. And you're using the light to kind of figure out if you are over the highway or not. If you follow the highway and something goes wrong, you'll probably be able to land on it.
Yeah.
That's there's a joke when you get your instrument rating, which is IFR, and the joke is I fly road. Because you're following the roads on the ground in worst case scenario.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I mean the light shining down to the road like that and some other things like that's not normal. I've seen airplanes that have a landing light that like folds down and then can suck back up into the belly with just a little lever that's completely mechanical. It's not anything electrical operating it, but I don't think it would create that imagery, and I don't think it would be a 6 foot across or 8 foot across concentration of light like that.
Yeah.
Or even from that time frame, right?
From that time frame. But I mean, landing lights on airplanes have been strong and powerful for a while, but not. Yeah, you wouldn't have something that big as one light. Even well,
the kid said it was a grouping of very bright lights, which doesn't really fit an aircraft.
Yeah, and then the first witness said circular, which I was kind of confused if that meant a circle of lights or one big light.
It was a brilliant, constant circular light he described as mammoth.
Okay.
And then the kid said extremely bright cluster of lights.
Yeah. See, I just don't see that many lights on a plane back then.
Yeah.
Not like that. If you go look at a 87 or something like that, and it's coming to land in the dark and you're on the front end of all those lights, it will look like the spaceship landing in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There are bright lights all over that thing. But that's a different story,
Yeah. All right. So the next one is 1977. What was the previous one? 76? 68. Okay, so now we're jumping up to 1977. Although it's unclear exactly where the sighting took place, Shiloh County Sheriff's Deputy Wayne Pelchar saw a glowing green object hovering in the sky. Suddenly, the object flew off at a high rate of speed. Deputy Pelchar relayed the story to dispatcher Charles Dunlap at the sheriff's office in Watkins Glen, excitedly remarked on the object's rapid departure. "Man, it boogied." After reporting the incident early in the evening, the deputy declined any further comment. So, sounds anomalous, 1977, possibility that we had something that could do that?
Maybe. I like that it was green.
Yeah.
That's pretty odd. Gosh, I wish like Josh or Barbara were around to talk about the color of lights on these things. The fact that it was bright green is strange. That almost makes me think more of like St. Elmo's fire or some kind of electrical effect or something like that.
Except it wouldn't shoot off if that's what it was. Like plasma doesn't tend to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Unless it, has some intelligence behind it. I don't know.
True. And the next one is October 20th, 1979. A military policeman leading a special 5-man team at the Seneca Army Depot was in a vehicle patrolling on around the base. And around the base. The team had been ordered to keep their distance from the platoon of MPs guarding the restricted area, and the witness had the driver park at a location inside the restricted area shortly after 5 a.m., where they could rest before watching civilian employees arrive at the base at 6 a.m. The witness described the event. "I was sitting in the passenger side up front and looking out at the plant." At the plant? Oh, there must have been, okay. I guess there was some kind of plant there. A sphere of light dropped out of the sky, probably 800 to 1,200 feet, right in my line of sight on the other end of the parking lot, just above the tree line. It was just hovering there, a sphere of light, best described as a UFO. Never saw anything like it, just a hovering, spinning light. I started yelling at the other men in the team to look up at this. Just as I did that, it zigzagged right, left, and about 5 times while going up and disappearing into the sky. Never saw anything move that fast with a zigzag motion. Nobody else on the team saw it. It was only a matter of 2 to 3 seconds and gone. That does not sound like technology, despite being right on the military base.
Yeah, it doesn't. It does not. No, not at all. The zigzag and shooting off, and I can't even try to argue that was a drone or something like that because we didn't have batteries small enough.
Right.
That's pretty weird.
But
That's
even nowadays, drones would have trouble doing from that description,
Right. Yeah.
Any thoughts, Jonathan?
That just sounds like the phenomenon messing with this one person.
Yeah.
It's just like none of his coworkers saw anything.
Yeah.
There's always a sense of humor there, I think. Or often, at least.
True.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quick mid-show break, contact info, and a recommendation. Contact info is wheredidtheroadgo.com. That's wheredidtheroadgo.com. That is where you will find connections to everything, all our social media, Discord. I have the Substack in there under the blog section. There's merchandise. There's all the shows all the way back to the beginning. Everything you could possibly want, including a link to the Patreon. It's only $3 a month. It helps us out immensely to keep the show going. And you get extra content with every show. You get the shows a week or two early, commercial free, plus extras thrown in as well. If you're into heavy music, I also do The Last Exit for the Lost, which is coming up on its 31st anniversary in June. It's heavy music, it's metal, it's punk, it's electronic stuff, but it's in the underground sort of level. The shows are very different, even week to week, and a lot of stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else. So if you want to find your favorite new stuff and you like that type of music, check it out, because we have live performances. We have just a lot of rare stuff I get into, and we talk about movies and review stuff and things like that. All right, as for a recommendation, I'm going to go way back in time to the ancient year of 2019. At least that's when this podcast ended. It was called Parasitecology, and that's Parasitecology, Colology. Apparently I can't read. It's only 14 episodes, and it's one word, Parasitecology. It's, it lists it as performing arts podcast, arts fiction, science fiction, but it's also funny. So it's about a 6-hour commitment to listen to the entire thing. The season finale was in August of 2019, and I had forgotten about this. This thing was a blast to listen to. It was just really funny and entertaining. It's nothing too deep or anything, but if you just want to listen to a fun, quick podcast and get a laugh, this one was done really well. So that's my recommendation for you for this week. Now back to the show.
All right, I am here with Jonathan Bartholomew and Super Saxon Inframan. And words are getting hard tonight. That's great. All right. So I'm reading from this article on Seneca Lake UFO sightings over the years that, I forgot what the name of the paper is. SenecaLakeMysteries.com is the website. And this is the very area I live in, which is why I think someone sent it to me. And, it has an interesting collection here we've gone through so far. Now we're up to 1983. And it says, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle published an article on September 18, 1983, profiling the Rochester UFO Study Group, founded in 1964 to investigate area UFO sightings. The group had gathered reports in recent weeks of unusual lights or objects over Seneca Lake and the Seneca Army Depot. Although details are currently scant on the 1983 depot sightings, there have been many high-profile UFO incidents over the years at U.S. Air Force bases where nuclear weapons were located, including 3 detailed reports from bases in Maine, Michigan, and Montana in 1975, and another from 2010 in Wyoming. And in September 1983, the Seneca Army Depot, which has held one of the largest stockpiles of nuclear weapons in the U.S., I did not know that, would have been in a heightened state of activity, readiness, and security due to U.S.-Soviet relations being at a low point in the history of the decades-long Cold War. So there's not much else there. I was not living here yet. That was 1983. But so, I mean, there wasn't really any real sightings in that report, other than the fact that there were a bunch of them. And I would be suspicious of anything over a military base as being potentially military.
Right.
But like, it's funny because like I had friends. So in the Seneca Army Depot, for whatever reason, they brought in a breed of white deer that are not native to the area, and they're protected in there. So people would tell me, oh, the deer are white because of the nuclear radiation.
I see.
And I'd always be like, I don't think that's going to turn deer white. But I'm not sure, because I'm a kid when I'm hearing this. And, now that they have, that army base got closed down in the 90s, I think. And now it's apartments and it's a prison. Like part of it's a prison, part of it's apartments. And they actually have a white deer tour there. And now there's tons of information on those deer. And every once in a while, one of them gets out, which I've talked about the story of driving, taking my girlfriend home one night. We come around the corner, just around from my house, and standing on the edge of a turn, looking like a statue, is this huge, pure white buck with giant antlers. And I see it, and like we both see it. We're like, is that real? Like, what is that just because it was standing like a statue? It really was. It was like, wow. And then it starts to run in front of the car, and I'm like, oh, crap. And I hit the brakes, and I slide to a stop and just bump the deer. And the deer falls on the hood, looks right at us, and then gets off the hood and leaves. And we're like, huh, well.
Yeah.
No damage, no nothing, didn't hurt the deer. It was just like kind of fell over on the hood. It was like, that was something. She was convinced it was a bad omen. And I'm like, I don't know.
I would feel like I was in the White Stag or something like that.
You would feel like you were what?
The White Stag, it was a book by Kate Seriah, but it was like a kid's book that got like a Newbery Award back in the day. But it's literally called The White Stag, and it sort of follows like a mythological retelling of like the Huns and stuff like that.
Oh.
But yeah, I just looked it up, and they're called the Seneca white deer.
Yeah.
And they really are like solid chalk white.
Yep.
That is crazy.
So imagine seeing a giant buck like that standing on the side of the road at like 1 a.m.
That's wild.
Oh, I would have gone home and like started figuring out how to make armor for myself and figuring out which European god I needed to like pay patronage to or something if that happened to me, Seriah.
I wish I had a dash cam back then. I mean, that was probably in the mid 90s. So, dash cams weren't a thing, nor were, cell phones or anything else where you could just grab something and take a picture. But even so, I don't think we would have gotten a picture of it because unless if it was just a matter of having a camera, because it all happened so fast.
Right.
I never, it would have been gone before we got a picture. So short of a dash cam that could have recorded the thing landing on the hood, you
wouldn't be able to catch it. Yeah. So the fact that it was a nuclear weapons stockpile, by the way, there makes things really interesting.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And Chris is always very good about bringing this up, though, with just things like that attracting attention from other things, whether that's terrestrial or something different. But I don't know. That puts a different spin on it for sure, for everything going on around there, as long as there were a lot of nuclear weapons stored there.
Yeah, I don't know what the connection between nuclear weapons and UFOs is. I mean, the obvious theory that people throw out there is that they're aliens and they're worried about our nuclear proliferation, but that doesn't work for me. So there's got to be something else.
That if aliens are worried about our nuclear proliferation, they would just leave.
Right.
They can, so they would.
Yeah. Chris would bring up that, it was Trinity, and the idea that like the Trinity test, like thinned the veil there, I think.
Oh, right.
So I'm sort of pulling this from stuff Chris has suggested. So I'm not as clear on my ideas about that either. But it is always interesting how that works.
Well, wasn't that worked into Twin Peaks too? The return.
It was. I'm trying to remember which episode it was because it has like
8.
There we go.
Episode 8. Even more so in Mark Frost's books that came out concurrently to that, The Secret History of Twin Peaks and then The Final Dossier. Secret History of Twin Peaks is one of the most interesting and bizarre things that I've read in a very, very long time, bringing in Jack Parsons and multiple presidents and Lewis and Clark. If you guys haven't read that, it's super worthwhile.
Wait, tell us the name again, Jonathan.
It's called The Secret History of Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Mark Frost.
Natalie just recommended that to me because she's been listening to the audiobook and said it was amazing. So, all right, so this next one's kind of interesting to me. So first of all, it's May 15th, 2001. And May 15th is the day that, that I had sort of my rebirth event in like 1991. So anytime May 15th pops up, that always sticks out to me because generally it's a shift in my life around that time period. And in this case, 2 weeks later is when I saw the giant UFO over Cayuga Lake. So this is like, or 3 weeks, because it was like June 2nd or something that I saw the UFO. So this is May 15th, 2001. An aerial object was recorded on video. The video doesn't seem to be here, unfortunately. It appears as a white light in the sky on video, but looked red, white, and yellow when viewed through binoculars. The witness watched the object for an estimated 15 minutes and described the light's behavior. The object moved with motions very similar to a bumblebee, up, down, sideways, very fast. It stayed in the same location as it was hovering. On video, it looks like if you had a laser light and were just moving it in all different directions on a wall. So that's, very different from what I saw. What I saw was a huge object with tons of lights on it, brighter than anything I've ever seen before, and it slowly descended into Cayuga Lake. And I can't tell you how long that sighting lasted, honestly. It was probably a couple of minutes because it descended very slowly. But the fact that it's in that same time period within a few weeks is interesting to me.
Yeah, and I kind of think of, and this is probably a bad analogy, but, flaps being like prolonged weather events or something like that too. Or just, the approaching of something anomalous is preceded and followed by smaller experiences around it. Maybe like, tremors and aftershocks. So I don't know. I think it's really interesting that those are close together for you. It's strange.
Yeah. And as far as I know, I've never seen anything. I don't really know if I've Googled it lately to see if that sighting was seen by anyone else. Because as far as I know, no one else had a UFO report that night. So I don't know if that was just, it was also probably the most liminal point in my entire life. So, of course, a giant UFO study. This is why my book's not done, because I was telling Mike Cleland about this, and he went, "What was going on in your life at the time?" And I went, "I don't know." And then I went and looked and went, "Oh, holy crap." And then started looking at other events and going, "Oh, yep, liminality plays a part. I can't just write about the events. I got to write about what's going on around them."
Yeah. Wow.
So I scrapped what I had. It started from scratch. So the next one here is July 4th, 2010. A group of 6 friends, all professionals ranging in age from 35 to 56, were watching fireworks around the lake from a dock. Within a 15-minute span, the group watched 3 separate unidentified lights flying over Seneca Lake. The first sighting lasted about 5 to 6 minutes, and the next 2 over 4 minutes each. All the objects came from the southwest, with the first object coming from a point further west in comparison. The witness provides the following account. The objects traveled northerly up the lake, pulsating an orange-red glow. Their sizes at their largest point was about twice the size of Venus, which was visible just above the western horizon, and at least as bright, if not brighter. Each time their altitudes were at least a few thousand feet based on the height of the surrounding hills from the water. Most of their movements were similar in character to one another, with erratic speed, fast then slow, and motions veering off to the one side or the other, sometimes instantly reversing their direction, sometimes appearing to stop or hover along their mainly northern route before continuing. None of the movements were super fast. All three sightings ended similarly, as they appeared to stop at about the same location to our south, distance unknown and difficult to even guess, although their routes to get to that area were slightly different. After being stationary a few seconds, they got brighter and brighter, and then began to move south upward slowly in relation to our position as their light dimmed and then vanished. The second object reappeared briefly and dully after a second or two of turning south and disappearing, remaining visible for 1 or 2 seconds again, which helped to verify that it was still moving after we lost sight of it before it then vanished. They were not aircraft that anyone could identify. No flashing lights typical of aircraft, movements were not typical of planes, and no airplane noises were heard.
Interesting.
Yes. It's 2010, so again, now we're getting into more modern technology, but like I don't know what that would even be about,
Yeah, between like disappearing, the zigzags, and then one of them sort of reappearing after the, I can't attribute that to drones in my head either, which would be my go-to for zigzagging lights these days, unfortunately.
No, I had a buddy who had a pretty decent commercial drone, and around that time, I think it was like 2009, he was the first person I knew to have one. Mm-hmm. And we were amazed that it went up and down.
Yeah.
Like the ones you can get at that point, we're not, in my experience, we're not doing that.
No, you're right. They just weren't like they are now. And they were expensive and hard to come by. And yeah. So I don't know. That sounds pretty anomalous to me. I love that they were like more or less mirroring each other's movements.
Yeah. And all went to the same point in the sky.
Yeah. Greg Bishop got annoyed at me about this one time, but he was talking about lights kind of moving along together. Mm-hmm. And I said something, it's kind of like they're porpoising like dolphins. And he was like, I don't like to ascribe, characteristics of any one thing to these. And I'm like, okay.
No, but it's okay to make an observation.
Yeah, exactly. And, but I understood he was just trying to give me like depth on some of these things. But that sounds to me more, like something being playful. With the other, because even like if a plane was trying, or planes were trying to fly in formation, they're going to maintain that their placement, right?
Yeah.
And if a lot of times when we have lights in the sky, they interact with each other. There's not a lot of concern for distance and things like that. They zigzag around in different ways. They merge and they separate, and all of these things that would be absolutely unsafe to do in something that was terrestrial.
So I also want to point out that Seneca, like the Native Americans who lived here, also had a lot of mythology around Seneca Lake in particular. There have been the booms that get heard around Seneca Lake, which are also called the Seneca Guns. And this confused me because that's also the name for them down in like North Carolina or something.
Okay.
And as far as Cayuga Lake, the next lake over, that has a fault line running under it, a fairly large one. I mean, for New York, I mean, not large for California, but for New York, it's one of the largest fault lines running through the state. It goes all the way from like Canada down to the Long Island Sound.
Yeah, I mean, that could be what's causing the sounds, though. Still, it doesn't have to be big to make noise.
True. But that's the other lake. That's Cayuga Lake. So Seneca Lake, as far as I know, although I have heard that New York State is literally crisscrossed with fault lines. They're just very small fractures. So this next one, March 9th, 2011, while traveling south from Geneva through Romulus on Route 96, the witness spotted a bright light in the northwestern sky. Map 2 sighting locations, Geneva, Romulus, Ovid, Penyan. The light was coming across Seneca Lake, traveling at a high rate of speed. The light continued across the lake, moving west to east, then abruptly changed direction, moving in a northeast direction toward the water tank located at the 5 Points Correctional Facility, which was the prison that replaced the Seneca Army Depot. The light continued to travel at a high rate of speed in this direction until I could no longer view it. There were no indications to me that this was an aircraft, military or otherwise. There were no other visible marker lights as there would have been with private, commercial, or military aircraft. I had stopped my vehicle initially just south of Kennedy Road, then proceeded to the entrance to Sampson State Park, where I further observed this bright light. Initially thought this was some type of aircraft, but it was moving way too fast and the light was too bright, and I'm not able to make out any shapes or hear any noises. So yeah, that's, again, I mean, as we get further along, it's harder to rule out technology, but these still seem pretty anomalous.
They do, and we've got the jail in there that used to be the
Depot,
where the nuclear weapons were stored too. So I don't know. That's still strange to me. It is very strange. Yeah, I mean, you do get some Doppler effect with jets and things sometimes where you really can't hear them till they pass you, but if you're seeing things move around in strange ways and in strange places, then, you don't have to decide it's a jet.
Right. So this one comes from May 19th, 2012. And this one's right from Ovid, literally 5 minutes away from me, which just partially burned all the way down, too. Like the whole.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of Main Street burned down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was crazy. Because it was a building that was built in like 1850 or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And one of the apartments above the Big M grocery store, they had a charger plugged in, and I guess the people came home. It was smoking. They ran outside. By the time they got outside and called for the fire department, the fire had already started. But
gosh.
Like the attics of all these buildings were all connected. So like they had old buildings that they had so many people here trying to put it out, and it was below freezing and a massive wind chill. So everything was freezing. The water is freezing. Everything's becoming ice despite the fact that they're fighting a fire.
Wow.
They had to kill the power, which also killed the power to the water tower that they were pulling water from. So they had to go down to lakes and creeks, which were also partially frozen, and get water to continue fighting. I don't know how many fire departments they had, but they finally ended up losing the entire block.
Wow.
It's just rubble now.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. But that's like lots of worst possible scenarios coming together at once.
Yeah, exactly. I was told there were firemen who, like their shirts or their gloves, literally froze to their skin.
I believe it. Man, that sounds awful.
And at least they contained it to one block because they were worried it was going to, jump over to the library across the street or jump to the next block because it was so bad.
Yeah. Wow.
The commercial power being tied into the same power that would fuel the water system sounds like a coding oversight. That can't be what that was intended to be. Well,
yeah. I mean, they cut the power because they didn't want any more fire on the, because it was getting toward the end of the block, and they wanted to cut that power so it wouldn't jump, the electrical wouldn't make it worse. But, I mean, the tower's not only just, a couple minutes up, a minute up the road from where the town is, so. So this one's from Ovid, May 19th, 2012. Over a 5-minute span, 2 witnesses watched as 4 bright orange lights moved rapidly through the sky from east to west, about 35 degrees above the horizon. All the objects moved at the same high speed and made no sound. Although 4 lights were seen in total, only 3 were seen at one time, with 2 and 3 appearing closer together. When the objects reached a point directly in front of the witnesses, they either faded out or moved toward the south and out of sight.
Huh. So, just immediately saying there are 4 lights, but only 3 were witnessed at the same time and they're fading out, then I'm like, well, how do we know that one light wasn't in one place and then
jump to another?
Jumping to another, yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Huh. The next one is July 5th, 2012. 3 adults and 2 children are on their way home from fireworks on Cayuga Lake. The trip took an eerie vibe when the group observed odd lightning high in the atmosphere, which glowed an orange-red. The witness described what happened next. When we reached Watkins Glen, I noticed 5 red orange, and Watkins Glen, incidentally, is at the south end of Seneca Lake. I noticed 5 orange orbs in the sky that looked similar to a star formation. It was shaped with 4 of them making a diamond with the 5th off to the bottom of the diamond. In the vehicle along with me were my wife, our friend, and our 2 children. We all saw this in disbelief. I parked the car for a moment and sat dumbfounded for a couple of minutes, even before thinking to grab our camera phones to videotape it. As we grabbed our phones, the object moved and simply disappeared before we could record anything. This was a bizarre event, and although I was a skeptic before, I have to admit I'm a believer today. There's simply no logical explanation for what we all witnessed.
Huh.
So odd lightning high in the atmosphere is interesting.
Yeah.
Orange red again, which seems to be common.
You know, there's what's the sprites that are called that are upper atmosphere lightning?
Yeah, that's it, sprites.
Yeah. Let's see.
But they don't. I don't think we can see sprites from the ground.
I don't think so either. I was just kind of high above thunderstorms, upper atmospheric lightning, also known as transient luminous events. I mean, it says they can form through lightning strikes, but that doesn't mean they're not forming high above where the strike happened. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
And the diamond formation and the fact that it just disappeared is all interesting to me. You have any comments on any of this, Jonathan?
What's interesting, the main thing that's interesting to me about this entire like loop of things, and I think the value of looking at things over a long period of time is some of the stuff is just randomly weird, but some of it is you could look at and it's like the 2010 thing was like, that's just barely a little too old to attribute to like a commercial drone and somebody being good at it.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff, it really feels like people are seeing things that would be somewhat normal or at least easily explainable a few years later than they saw it. And if you think about like things like, the explanations, or not explanations, but descriptions of like, Zeppelins being seen in the 1890s when there weren't Zeppelins. And
right.
Like, you see a bunch of throughout history of things being seen in the sky that's just a little too advanced for what actually would have been available at the time. This kind of stuff to me feels like a smaller sampling, like a miniature version of something like that.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that is a super cool perspective of this. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting.
All right, we got a couple more here. Let's see if we can get through them before the end of the show. Otherwise, we'll continue it on a Patreon. So August 23rd, 2014, husband and wife camping at Watkins Glen State Park on the northern end of the Tuscarora Village campground. While looking north from their campfire through the trees, they saw a silent, slow-moving, round, orange-red object moving to the west along the path of Glen Creek. The couple watched the object for about a minute as it continued westward, intermittently losing sight of it in the tree canopy until it was no longer visible through the trees. They described it as a perfect circle and estimated the altitude to be about the same as propeller-driven planes, roughly 10,000 feet or lower. The witnesses provided a detailed description of the object. The object was orange in the center and had a red fire-like ring on the peripheral circle, which had fire-like licks or prongs emanating into the center orange portion, similar to looking straight up into the base of a rocket outlet, but flame going toward the center, and flames were slowly intermittent like dying embers, not a fast burn. So that's different.
Yeah. I like the burn. Interesting.
Yeah.
I just say interesting about everything tonight. I apologize. I'm kind of visualizing.
It's better than saying, well, that's boring.
Yeah, right. No, I just keep getting like, I kind of picture it in my head, and then I'm trying not to like bring too much to it at the same time either, because I'm like, I wonder if that was something re-entering. Well, would it look like that?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And they didn't, I don't think they said how it disappeared, did they? No.
Yeah, but it kind of makes you wonder if it was a component of something like a multi-stage, like multi-stage things still get launched.
True.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, they lost it over into the trees.
Mm-hmm.
So I see what you're saying, like a piece of something falling to the earth.
Yeah. It was a week or two ago. Somebody, I saw the article about it. found a meteorite in your yard that was maybe a little bit smaller than your fist closed. And, people had seen it fly over a couple of places. And, it was a very small fireball when it came over. And then they found where it landed. I think it was in the UK.
Oh, okay.
But it was like in this lady's garden, basically. So, I mean, you do get stuff like that sometimes. It's either, like Jonathan's talking about, that's just a piece of something or a stage of something. And then other times, like, there are just little tiny meteors.
So I was driving to work in Trumansburg. It had to be around 92 or so. And this huge blue light goes across the sky going north. And I was like, the hell was that? And I was assuming meteor or something. It was big, and it was like almost like pulsing blue. And I was like, what the hell? And then there was nothing. And I went to work, and I used to get Much Music, which was like the Canadian version of MTV. And they had a show on there every day called the Power 30, where they would have 30 minutes of metal videos in the afternoon. And the next day I'm watching it, they're filming outside the day before doing an interview, and the same blue meteor goes overhead.
Oh, wow.
So I have that video somewhere. And if you look it up, you can find info on it. And supposedly it crashed and destroyed a trailer home or something like that, but no one's ever found evidence of the meteor. So it's just kind of one of those weird things where they're like, we're pretty sure it was a meteor. It was blue because of this. It was seen, from like New York up into Canada, and then it crashed here. But we have no evidence of it crashing, except for the fact that it like seemed to destroy this like home. Yeah.
It's crazy when it destroys the home, but there's no remnant of the object that destroyed the home, I've told this story on the show before too, where I was like 9 years old at my aunt and uncle's house, and my cousin and I are playing in the front yard in the evening. And of course, we just like watched Unsolved Mysteries on TV, and that's when we saw the massive fireball going across the sky, which did not look that far away. But, we ran in, got our parents. They came out, saw the tail end of it. They were calling the sheriff's department and everything. And it turned out to be part of a Russian satellite. Yeah. And the craziest thing was it was not just like, a mile or two away. It was like 50 miles south of where we were. But, when you're 9 and you just watch Robert Stack on TV and you see this coming across the sky, like, my cousin and I thought that like we were, it was the body snatchers were coming.
All right. We are out of time, so we'll cover the rest of these. There's like 3 more. We'll cover them in the Patreon segment. And if people want to look at the article, it is it's labeled Orbs, Not Drones, 70 Years of Strange Lights Over Seneca Lake. It's on SenecaLakeMysteries.com. And where can people find you guys? Jonathan?
I can be found at the podcast Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic, which is anywhere you find podcasts. I also have a Substack. It's called The Light from Alamuth, which I deal with mostly writing stuff, like information about novels, things like that. That's where you're going to get that.
Okay. And you have a book out?
I just recently, about 2 weeks ago from this recording, released Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine, which is the first book in a series. And that can be found anywhere you get books.
All right. And Saxon, if people want to contact you?
Yeah, I'm under Super Inframan on Instagram, and I'm giving Blue Sky a shot with that too. So all right. You can track me down there too.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. I can't do this without you, so thank you for supporting the show. And know that every positive thing that comes out of this show is partially because of you. I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons who are pledging $10 or more a month. Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Marty Garza, Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Marthartha, Midnight Review Presents, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Abby Allen, Cherry Trapezoid, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Beluminati,
Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis. Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable. Corey Nelson, Diane B, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, Jamie Page. History and Coffee, J Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, Jonathan Frost, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Shurek, Cool Kitty, Kristen L, Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda from Michigan, Linz Jackson K, MJ Armstrong, Mark Shoemaker, Mark Brady, Mark Smith, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sasha McHale, Janet's Planet, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic podcast, Verosh K, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Stacy Sherwood, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Victoria, Vincent Trewill, Will Cherry, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Colin Karras, Craig Sagastumi, and Matthew Brown. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. There's, of course, a Patreon-only segment to go along with this. You can also get it on Apple, or you can go to the Patreon site and just pay to download a single show or a single segment if you want, instead of becoming a member. But it's very much worth your while to become a member, because you get extra stuff every week, and almost every week. You get the shows weeks early and no commercials and all that fun stuff, and it helps us out a lot, as does reviewing the show and recommending it to other people. I want to welcome a few new patrons, Jamie Page, Zach LaPalm, I hope I got that right, and practicing metaphysician. Let me try that again. Metaphysician. Yes, practicing metaphysician. Welcome. I hope you enjoy the extra content. I'll see you next time.
You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.